Welcome to Train Freediving. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about what I call the 3 trainable parts of freediving. The reason I'm talking to you about this is because I believe that there are a few common struggles that a lot of freedivers are dealing with that could be solved by having a better way to categorize and understand all of the different things that you need to be working on and how all of the different exercises that you might be doing fit into that bigger picture of training for your goal. Poorly categorized or poorly organized training is something that I've struggled with many times in the past. One of the most obvious examples that I can think of in my own diving was a few years ago when I was training to do 70 meters bifins. Now at that time I was really struggling with equalization beyond 60 meters. I was occasionally having trachea squeeze. Most of the time I was swallowing my mouth fill, and I wasn't actually able to dive deeper than 60-65. I couldn't get to my goal. So I believed that the best way for me to move forward, the best exercise that I should be doing, or the best exercises that I should be doing, would be to focus on exhale training, either FRC or RV diving, as a way to build my equalization. Even now, while I would completely agree that exhale diving is the best way to move your equalization deeper, it's not the only thing you should be doing. And that was the mistake that I made. I spent an entire month only doing exhale diving. I got really good at FRC. I got really good at RV. And at the end of that month, when I started reattempting to go to personal best depths, I wasn't even able to get close to my old personal bests. The rest of my diving completely fell apart. My CO2 tolerance was terrible. My breath hold was terrible. My finning was terrible. Everything that I had worked on before had kind of deteriorated, fallen apart, and it wasn't working very well. And then it took an additional 2 to 3 months of doing other types of training to rebuild back to my old level. And then finally, after a long process that was much longer than it needed to be, I achieved my goal of 70. The reason I had that problem, the reason I had to take a 3-month detour to get to my goal, was because I wasn't training everything that I needed to train. I was focusing only on one part. Now, to have a more balanced approach, I choose to organize my training into 3 parts and make sure that I'm training each of them relatively equally, trying to have a balanced approach, make sure that nothing in my diving is falling behind. When it comes time to working towards setting a personal best, I know that everything that I need to have developed is going to have been developed in my training. So now I'm going to introduce to you the 3 different parts of freediving. These 3 parts are going to be associated with your goal. So you need to have set a goal, you need to know what you're working towards, roughly which depth, distance, or time. And the second thing you need to consider is that not all disciplines include 3 parts. The 3 parts that I have listed down are breath hold, movement, and pressure. Pool disciplines are not going to include pressure. There's no need to equalize. The water pressure doesn't increase and decrease as you go down and up. So for pool divers, we can completely forget about the pressure part. And then to a certain extent, static divers only need to worry about breath hold. Really, there are 1 to 3 trainable parts of freediving depending on the discipline that you're going to be working on. At the top of the list, I also have what I would consider goal-specific training. And I'm going to leave this to the end because after I talk about the 3 parts, goal-specific training is going to make a lot more sense. So to start things off, let's talk about breath hold. And understanding breath hold training is very simple if you know what your goal is and roughly how long of a dive is going to take to achieve your goal. If we're designing breath holds around the target dive time that we want to achieve, we could safely say that breath hold training is going to include the total dive time that we're trying to achieve. So whether we're working on individual repetitions or sets of small dives. The sum of the small dives in the set or each repetition should be roughly equal to the total dive time that we expect to achieve. And we can also say that breath hold training is going to include mild to moderate levels of increased CO2 and decreased O2. We're trying to become mild or moderately hypoxic or hypercapnic compared to our goal. To give a quick example about exercises associated with breath hold, if you are a deep diver who knows that you're going to have a 2-minute dive time, so for example 60 meters, you might do a hang with a total dive time of 2 minutes. So you won't dive as deep, it won't be as difficult as a full dive. However, we can still work on the total dive time, and you might be able to do 2 to 3 repetitions of this dive in training. If you're a static diver, let's say you're training for 4 minutes, an exercise that you might want to do is to do a 2-minute static followed by 2 1-minute statics, each with only 1 to 5 recovery breaths between each hold. Both of these exercises are not going to be as difficult as your goal. However, they are going to allow you to experience the total dive time per repetition or per set of breath holds, and you're going to be exposed to mild to moderate CO2 and hypoxia. Moving on, we're going to talk about movement training. Movement training is going to be something that's built around either the total meters that you expect to cover during your dive, or it has to be done with a minimum number of meters that allows you to experience all of the physical efforts, skills, techniques, procedures, and dive profile that you're going to expect on your dive. Just to recap, movement training is going to include either the total meters experienced during your dive or the complete, or as close to complete as possible, the dive profile that you're going to expect on your dive. So I'll give 2 examples, one for each. So a great example of a total meters based exercise for movement would be a 50-meter dive in dynamic plus 4 times 25-meter dives. And you might do all of these with anywhere between 1 and 5 recovery breaths between each lap. Now this set of laps is going to come out to 150 meters total, which means it's a good way to train your movement, which is going to be the physical effort, the muscular effort, the technical effort, all of those things around a 150-meter dynamic dive. Now, an example for a dive profile exercise, something that includes all of the procedures, techniques, and skills that you're going to need on your actual dive, might be to do deep dives that are set at 10 meters deeper than your free fall. So for a deep dive, as soon as you enter free fall, you've pretty much done everything that you need to do. You've gotten down to free fall, you've done the hardest part of equalization, you've taken your mouth fill, you've set yourself up in a correct position, posture, you've got your eyes closed, you might have your hand on the line to guide yourself, and now from that point on, pretty much nothing changes until you get to the bottom, and then the ascent always looks the same. Finally, the last part of diving, the third part, which is only going to apply to deep divers, is going to be pressure. Now, pressure training is the thing that's going to help you make sure that you're equalizing safely, that your chest is flexible, that your blood shift is strong, that your alveoli and your trachea, the tissues are strengthened and flexible. All of those things that you need to get yourself down to depth safely, effectively, and consistently. A good pressure-related exercise is going to be something that includes both a certain degree of chest compression and all of the equalization skills and techniques that you're going to need to reach your deep dive. And I just made a video about this last week, so to give you guys, again, just a recap on what the best exercises are to train your tolerance and your ability to deal with pressure is going to be exhale diving. So for less advanced divers, divers who are just learning the mouth fill or who are still diving to 30 to 50 meters on frenzel, you might want to practice FRC dives, diving on a passive exhale. And if you are more advanced divers using the mouth fill diving deeper than 50 meters, you're going to want to switch to practicing RV dives or diving after a full forced exhale. The more parts there are, the more careful you need to be to train all of them. You have to alternate, making sure not to spend too much time only training one thing. Like in my little example at the beginning of the video, I only trained pressure for 1 month, and at the end of that month, my movement and breath hold were so far behind that I was actually a worse diver than I was before I started training for that 1 month. So make sure to have a balanced approach between all three parts. I also want to talk to you about goal-specific training. The reason I left this to the end is because goal-specific training is something that includes all three parts, or at least all the parts that apply to your discipline. A goal-specific exercise is going to include mild to moderate exposure or challenge level of breath hold training, movement training, and pressure training. So you're going to be exposing yourself to stimulus in all three categories on every single dive that you do as part of your goal training. Basically, the only way to do goal-specific training is to do what I call basic repetitions, doing everything as you would on a personal best attempt, just on a smaller dive. Good basic repetitions are going to be done anywhere between 50 and 80%. And you can be doing anything between 2 and 5 repetitions of any dives within these percentages. So with all of those examples that I gave to you, whether it's a breath hold exercise, a movement exercise, a pressure exercise, or even a goal-specific basic repetition exercise, it's your job as a diver to make sure that you're not neglecting any of those individual parts. If you make the same mistake that I did and train only one category for an extended period of time, the other 2 or 3 categories that apply to your diving are gonna fall behind. So you should take the time to consider how all of the exercises that you do in your personal free dive training apply to these 3 different parts of training. Consider how often you do them, and consider if you can improve the balance that you have, making sure that you're doing all the different types of training all the time to make sure that nothing's falling behind. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions about the 3 trainable parts of freediving, let me know in the comments, and also let me know if this categorization is already something that you've been doing, or if it's something that you believe can actually help improve the quality of your training, the consistency of your training, and make sure that you're a more balanced and complete freediver when it comes time to achieving your goals.